I want to get straight to the part that matters, because I've spent 8 months trying to find a way to tell this that makes it sound less insane than it is, and I've given up. There's no version of this that sounds reasonable. I'm just going to tell you what happened, and you can do whatever you want with it. 3 of us. Me, my friend Carter, and a guy Carter knew named Reeve, who'd explored Brush Park before and said he knew the safe entry points. February, around midnight. Brush Park is a neighborhood of Victorian mansions in Detroit, most of them gutted by fire or collapse, a few still standing in various states of decay. It's been a destination for urban explorers for years. We knew what we were getting into, or we thought we did. We went into a house on Alfred Street, 3 stories, most of the roof intact, which is rare in that neighborhood. Reeve said he'd been inside before, that the floors were stable on the first 2 levels, that it was worth the risk. It looked fine from the outside. That was the last time anything about that night looked fine. Inside, the ground floor was what you'd expect. Peeling walls, collapsed sections, debris, the remains of furniture, a staircase that Reeve tested and said would hold. We went up to the 2nd floor, and that's when the first thing happened. Carter's headlamp went out. Battery failure happens. He had a backup flashlight. He switched to it, no big deal. We kept moving. We were in what had been a bedroom. Reeve was photographing the fireplace. Carter was looking at something on the wall. I was in the doorway. And from directly above us, from the 3rd floor, something walked across the room. Slow, heavy footsteps. Not running, not panicking, walking, deliberate. Crossing the room above our heads from one side to the other, pausing, then crossing back. All 3 of us froze. Nobody spoke for probably 5 seconds. Then Carter said, very quietly, that we needed to go. Reeve said it was probably an animal. But even as he said it, his voice had changed, gotten thinner, and he wasn't moving toward the stairs to check. He was moving toward the far wall, putting distance between himself and the ceiling. The footsteps stopped. We waited. 30 seconds, a minute, nothing. Reeve said again that it was an animal, a raccoon, a dog that got in, something. He was saying it more for himself than for us. I could hear it in his voice, the way a person talks when they're trying to convince themselves. The words coming out just slightly too fast, slightly too flat. Then the footsteps started again. But this time, they weren't above us. They were on our floor, in the hallway outside the room. We had not heard anything on the stairs. Whatever had been on the 3rd floor was now outside the door, and it had not used the staircase to get there. Carter made a sound I had never heard him make before. Not a word, just a sound. Involuntary. The kind that comes out of you when your body reacts before your brain can tell it not to. He grabbed my sleeve and pulled, and I did not resist. I was already moving, all 3 of us moving at once toward the window at the far end of the room. Not the door, not the hallway where the footsteps were, the window. Reeve got there first. He looked out, checking the drop. 2nd floor, maybe 12 feet to the ground, which in February means frozen ground. The footsteps in the hallway moved closer to the door. Reeve went out the window. He didn't say anything. He didn't count down. He just went, dropped. I heard him land hard on the ground below. Carter went next. I was last. I climbed through the frame and I dropped, and my legs absorbed the impact badly, and I fell sideways onto the frozen ground, and the cold hit me like something physical, and I lay there for 1 second on my back, looking up at the 2nd floor window I had just come through. There was a figure in the window, standing in the window frame looking down at us. I do not know how long I saw it. Less than 2 seconds, probably. I scrambled up and ran, and Carter and Reeve were already ahead of me, and we ran the full block back to the car, and none of us talking, all three of us running like the ground was going to open up under us. We got to the car. We got in. Carter locked the doors. For a long moment, none of us said anything. Then Reeve said, his voice completely flat, "I've been in that house 3 times before. There was never anything in it." Carter said, "Did you see it in the window?" Reeve said yes. Carter said, "What did it look like?" Reeve was quiet for a long time. Then he said he didn't want to answer that question. I have thought about that answer for 8 months. Not about what Reeve saw, because I don't know what Reeve saw and I'm not sure I want to. What I think about is the specific way he said it. Not "I don't know," not "I'm not sure," I don't want to answer that. Like, he knew. Like, whatever he saw was specific enough that describing it was a choice, and he was choosing not to make it. I saw a silhouette, a person shape, standing in the window, completely still, watching us run. That's what I saw. But the way Reeve wouldn't describe what he saw makes me think that what I saw and what he saw weren't the same thing. That whatever was in that window looked different depending on who was looking. That it showed each of us something specific, something meant for us individually. I don't know what it showed Carter. Carter won't talk about it. In 8 months, he's brought it up exactly once to say that he doesn't bring it up, and that's the only reference he's made to that night. I don't know what it showed Reeve. Reeve left the Urbex community entirely. His accounts went dark 2 weeks after that night. I heard through someone else that he'd moved out of state. I know what it showed me because I saw it. A silhouette. A person standing in a window looking down. But here's the thing I've never told Carter or Reeve. The thing I've never told anyone until right now. The silhouette I saw in the window. It was my height, my build, the way it stood, the angle of the shoulders, the slight forward lean I apparently have without realizing it. It looked like me, standing in the window of a burning house, looking down at myself running away. And it was completely calm. It wasn't chasing us. It wasn't moving at all. It was just watching me leave, like it wasn't worried, like it knew I'd be back. Ryan has been my best friend for 11 years. I need you to understand that before anything else. We met freshman year of college. We've lived in the same city our whole adult lives. I was best man at his wedding. I know him the way you know someone after 11 years of being genuinely close. I know his voice, his laugh, the specific way he argues when he thinks he's right, and the specific way he goes quiet when he knows he's wrong. I know him. Which is why what happened inside the Gary Southworks plant in August took me so long to name. Because naming it meant accepting that for approximately 2 hours, the person walking next to me in that building was not Ryan. 4 of us went in. Ryan, me, our friend Phoebe, who'd been exploring with us for 3 years, and a newer guy named Cal, who'd found our group online. The Gary Southworks is one of the largest abandoned industrial sites in the country, a former steel mill that covers hundreds of acres along Lake Michigan. We'd been planning it for months. We entered through a gap in the perimeter fence on the south side at around 9 in the evening, while it was still light enough to orient ourselves. The first hour was normal. Ryan was Ryan, joking around, taking photos, complaining about the humidity the way he always did in August. We moved through the main production floor, which is the size of several football fields, navigating around collapsed sections of roof and machinery that hadn't moved in 30 years. Ryan and I had done dozens of explores together, and we had a rhythm. I knew where he'd go before he went there. We worked well in the same space. Then, somewhere around the second hour, inside a section we'd call the furnace room, Ryan went quiet. Not unusual by itself. People go quiet in big spaces at night. I didn't think about it. What I noticed first, and dismissed as quickly as I noticed it, was that Ryan stopped walking like Ryan. That sounds like nothing. It is not nothing. Ryan has a specific gait. Long strides, slightly duck-footed, always moving a little faster than the group. You know how the people in your life move. You've absorbed it without knowing. And the Ryan-shaped person next to me had started taking shorter steps, placing his feet differently, moving in a way that was recognizably a person, but not recognizably him. I told myself I was imagining it. 20 minutes later, Phoebe called Ryan's name from about 15 feet behind us. He didn't react for a full second and a half. 1.5 seconds of nothing before he turned his head. A second and a half is a long time when someone calls your name. You don't think about your own name. You just turn. Ryan turned like someone who had heard an unfamiliar sound and was locating the source. I told myself he was tired, distracted. The third thing I cannot explain away. We stopped to rest in a smaller room off the main floor. Ryan sat down on a piece of equipment and faced the wall, just sitting, facing the wall, not moving. I watched him for about 30 seconds before I said his name. He turned and looked at me and smiled. Ryan's smile is something I would recognize in a photograph from across a room. I've seen it 10,000 times. It is completely specific to him, the asymmetry of it, the way his eyes do a particular thing. The smile he gave me was not that smile. It had all the right components. Lips up, eyes slightly crinkled, the geometry roughly correct. But it was off in a way that made my stomach drop before I could think of why. The same way an almost right face is more disturbing than a wrong face, because your brain knows what right looks like and is screaming that this isn't it. I said, "You okay?" He said, in Ryan's voice, that he was fine, just tired. Ryan's voice, the right words. Almost. There was something in the cadence that wasn't right, a slightly different rhythm. The word tired, landing a half beat late. I am sitting here right now trying to describe the difference between Ryan saying he was fine and this thing saying he was fine, and I cannot find the words. It was the same words in the same voice. It was also completely, unmistakably not the same. I looked at Phoebe. She was looking at Ryan. When she looked at me, her expression was asking me a question I was not ready to answer. We left about 10 minutes later. Walking back to the fence, Ryan was quiet the whole way. But twice he stopped abruptly and looked back at the main building, completely still for 3 or 4 seconds, like something unfinished. Ryan never does that. When we leave, we leave. We got out. We drove home. Phoebe texted me from her car before she even pulled away. "Did you notice Ryan tonight?" I said yes. She said, "When did it start?" I said, "Furnace room, around hour 2. She said, "I noticed it before that. Right after the room with all the equipment still in rows." I noticed something in his eyes. Something in his eyes. I've thought about that every day for 4 months. Because here's the thing none of us can get around. The Ryan who drove us home was fine. The Ryan who texted me the next morning was fine. The Ryan who has been my best friend for 11 years, who I've had dinner with twice since August, whose kid's birthday party I went to last month, is fine. He doesn't remember anything unusual about that night. I asked him once, carefully, if anything had felt strange inside the plant. He thought about it and said no, a bit out of it for a while, maybe the heat, but a good explore. A bit out of it. He said it the way you say something that doesn't feel significant. And I nodded and didn't push it, because the alternative was accepting something I have not been able to accept in 4 months of trying. That whatever came out of the Gary Southworks that night in Ryan's body is not what went in. That it learned enough in 2 hours to pass as him, and that it has been passing as him ever since. I watch him sometimes now, when he's not expecting it, mid-sentence, mid-laugh, when his guard is down, looking for what Phoebe saw, the thing in his eyes. Most of the time, he's Ryan. The voice right, the laugh right, all of it right. But sometimes, just for a second, something flickers. Something behind the eyes that takes a half beat too long to respond. Something that is almost Ryan. And almost, when you've known someone for 11 years, is the most terrifying word in the language. There's a rule in urban exploration that everyone knows and most people follow. You don't split up. Doesn't matter how big the building is. Doesn't matter how experienced you are. Doesn't matter if you've done it 100 times without incident. You stay together. Because in an abandoned building at 2 a.m, a twisted ankle or a floor giving way is the difference between a scary story and a body nobody finds for 3 weeks. We knew the rule. We broke it. And I need to tell you exactly how it happened, because it didn't happen the way it always does in stories like this, where someone does something obviously stupid. It happened the way things actually go wrong, which is gradually and without anyone noticing the moment it started. My name is Derek. The others were my best friends since college, Marcus, and then 2 guys we've been exploring with for about a year, Tyler and John. 4 of us, all experienced, all with the right gear. Headlamps, backup flashlights, first aid kit, radios that worked on their own frequency so we didn't rely on cell service. We'd done Bethlehem Steel, Eastern State Penitentiary, a decommissioned Navy ship in Baltimore. We knew what we were doing. Pennhurst was the one we'd been planning for 2 years. If you don't know Pennhurst, it's a former state institution in Spring City, Pennsylvania. Opened in 1908, closed in 1987 after decades of documented abuse and neglect. Multiple buildings on a large campus, most of them now off limits, but some accessible if you know where the fence lines have gaps. It has a reputation even among serious urban explorers, not just the haunted house tourist kind, but the real kind. People who've been doing this for 10 years and don't rattle easily. Something about the scale of the suffering that happened there. The weight of it, one guy in our community said, is different from other places. Like the air itself remembers. We went in through the east fence at 11:30 on a Saturday night in October. Pennhurst does a legitimate haunted attraction on part of the campus in October, which meant there was actual foot traffic nearby, which actually made us less visible. We had done our homework. We knew which building we wanted, the main patient ward, Mayflower Hall. We'd studied the floor plan. The first hour was exactly what a good explorer feels like. That particular combination of adrenaline and focus, moving quietly through a space that hasn't seen regular human activity in decades, and the smell of old concrete and mold and something else underneath that you can't name. The way your headlamp throws shadows that move wrong because the surfaces aren't flat anymore. We move through the ground floor in a line. Marcus at the front, then me, then Tyler, then John. Documenting, photographing, whispering commentary to each other the way you do. We found the old ward rooms on the second floor. The iron bed frames still bolted to the floor. Personal effects left behind when the facility closed, which happens sometimes. The speed of an institutional closure, meaning that things get left. Shoes. A child's drawing pinned to a wall and never taken down. These things hit you differently than decay does. Decay you expect. Personal objects in an abandoned building have a specific weight that takes a minute to process. And Marcus was photographing one of the ward rooms, and the rest of us were spread across the hallway outside. John had walked ahead maybe 20 feet to check what was around the corner. Tyler was in the doorway of the room across the hall. I was between them, checking my own camera settings. That was the moment. Right there, nobody made a decision to split up. We just weren't together anymore. I heard John say, from around the corner, that there was something I needed to see. I went around the corner. There was a door at the end of the short hallway, heavy, institutional, the kind with a wire mesh window. It was standing slightly open. Through the window, I could see another corridor beyond, darker than the one we were in, the kind of dark that feels deeper than just an absence of light. John was standing in front of it with his flashlight pointed at the floor. He wasn't moving. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said he'd heard something from the other side of the door. He said it was breathing, not air movement, not the building settling. Breathing. I stood next to him, and we both listened, and I heard nothing. I said I heard nothing. He said it stopped when I came around the corner. We stood there for a moment, and I was about to say, we should go get Marcus and Tyler when the door moved. Not opened, not slammed, just moved. A slow, slight shift, the way a door moves when there's a pressure change somewhere in the building. The gap widened by maybe 2 inches. John grabbed my arm. His grip was hard enough that I felt it through my jacket. He was not the kind of person who grabbed your arm. In a year of doing this with him, I had never seen him react physically to anything. We went back around the corner and got Marcus and Tyler. I told them what John had said. Marcus wanted to go look. Tyler said he thought we should head back toward the exit, that we'd been inside long enough. John didn't say anything. He was standing with his back against the wall and his headlamp pointed at the floor, and he had the look of someone whose internal calculation had already finished and reached a conclusion that the rest of us hadn't gotten to yet. Marcus went around the corner. He came back 30 seconds later and said the door was closed. I said it had been open when John and I were there. Marcus said it was closed now, and that the corridor on the other side looked empty, and that old buildings moved on their own, and that we should keep going because we hadn't done the 3rd floor yet. Tyler said he was heading to the exit, and this is the moment I want to describe as carefully as I can, because I've replayed it many times. Tyler saying he was leaving was not dramatic. He said it the way you say you're going to get a glass of water, matter of fact, low key, the way he said most things. And then he walked toward the stairwell without waiting for a response. Marcus called after him, something like, "Come on, don't be that guy." Tyler didn't slow down. The 3 of us stood there for a moment. Then Marcus said we were fine, that Tyler was just spooked, that if we left every time one person got nervous, we'd never finish anything. He was right. technically. He had been right about that exact thing on other explores. John still wasn't talking. Well, he was watching the direction Tyler had gone. I made the wrong call. I stayed with Marcus. We did the 3rd floor. Marcus was right that it was worth seeing. The administrative section. The records room with patient files still in the drawers. The kind of documentation that you photograph and don't read because reading it would require processing it, and you're not ready to do that in an abandoned building at midnight. It was good work. An hour, maybe a little more. Marcus was focused and professional, the way he always was. I was less focused than usual. My attention kept drifting back toward the stairwell, toward the 2nd floor hallway, toward the closed door at the end of it. John barely spoke for that entire hour. He documented, he moved when we moved, but there was a quality to his silence that was different from his usual quiet. He kept his flashlight angled lower than he normally did, close to the floor in front of him. He didn't photograph much. We went back down at around 1:30. Tyler was waiting in the ground floor corridor near the exit, sitting on a piece of rubble with his headlamp off, in the dark. He'd been sitting there in the dark for over an hour. Marcus said, jokingly, that he was being dramatic. Tyler looked at him for a moment, and then he said that, while he was sitting there, he had heard someone on the 2nd floor walking the hallway above him, back and forth, slowly, for about 45 minutes, and then it stopped. Marcus said it was probably us. We were on the 2nd floor for a while, before we went up to 3. Tyler said it wasn't us. He said the footsteps were coming from the east wing of the 2nd floor. We had come in through the west, and the east wing was the section behind the locked door. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Marcus said we should get out, and we got out. On the drive home, none of us talked about it much. Tyler said once that he wanted everyone to note, for the record, that he had called it. Marcus said the footsteps were probably an animal. The building had wildlife in it. That was normal. John sat in the back seat and didn't say anything the entire 2-hour drive. A few days later, I texted the group chat a message asking if anyone wanted to plan the next explore. Marcus responded almost immediately. Yes, already looking at locations. Tyler said he was out for a while, that he needed a break. John read the message and didn't respond. That was 8 months ago. John still hasn't responded to that message. And not just that message. He stopped responding to the group chat entirely after that night. I've texted him directly a few times. He replies, "He's okay, he's just been busy." But the John who replies to my texts is quieter than the John I knew before Pennhurst. And I can't tell if something happened to him that night that he hasn't told us about, or if what happened to him was the same thing that happened to all of us, just more of it. The thing is, he was the one who heard it first. He was standing at that door before I came around the corner. Whatever was breathing on the other side of that door, John was the first one to hear it. And he was alone with it, for however long it took me to walk 20 feet. He never told us what he heard exactly. I asked once directly, and he said just breathing. Just slow breathing, from the other side of the door. But the way he said it, the way he said just, like there was something else he wasn't saying. Like just breathing was the part he decided I was allowed to know.